turned a corner there with that question, didn't it?
Yes, that's right. You'll remember, Daytona, that the transition itself and Hunter Biden, via the transition, put out these corresponding statements when this story broke a couple days ago that the president-elect's son, Hunter Biden, is under investigation by the Justice Department over possible tax charges, I believe either tax fraud or tax evasion. And so we haven't heard President-elect Biden on camera directly address this, and Fox's own Peter Doocy, who is covering the transition, shouted out at the end of this event where he's announcing these cabinet picks to respond, essentially saying, did your son commit a crime? And all we heard from the president-elect was saying he's proud of his son. So we're going to throw it over now to Fox News correspondent Mike Emanuel, and he's going to break down all the particulars of what's going on in this Hunter Biden investigation.
Well, Andrew, it looks like there's a bit of some technical issues going on right there. Let me try to get it figured out. Oh, wait, here we go. We got it.
All right, great.
Sure, we'll hear more about it. I think Hunter Biden will have to stand on the merits of his case.
At a time when many lawmakers are concerned about China's influence on a next administration.
What other connection do they have into China? You know, we may only just have really been looking at the tip of the iceberg.
Former Hunter Biden business partner Tony Bobulinski claims he had 2 face-to-face meetings with Joe Biden in 2017 after his time as vice president. Bobulinski says Joe Biden was trying to convince him to go into business as CEO of a venture with a Chinese energy company.
Why at 10:38 on the night of May 2nd would Joe Biden take time out of his schedule to sit down with me to have a discussion about his family and my family and business at a very high level?
The Wall Street Journal reports Attorney General Bill Barr knew about the numerous investigations looking into Hunter Biden's business and financial dealings since at least this spring, and worked to keep the probes out of public view during the election. A spokeswoman for the Attorney General declined to comment. Barr signaled in May he wanted the criminal justice system to stay out of partisan politics.
It is critical that we have an election where the American people are allowed to make a decision. We cannot allow this process to be hijacked by efforts to drum up criminal investigations of either candidate.
A key ally of President Trump says that was unfair.
AG Barr, I mean, the excuse will be, hey, look, we didn't want to influence the election. Well, you know what you did? You influenced the election by suppressing very important investigations.
A Biden campaign surrogate says the Attorney General acted properly.
He was following the rules of the Department of Justice. Did he follow the rules? That's a good thing.
Some Republicans are already calling for a special counsel to investigate these Biden family business dealings, expressing concern the next president's attorney general won't be able to do it fairly, and worried that U.S. attorneys digging into these matters could be replaced. In Washington, Mike Emanuel, Fox News.
And Daytona, we might also add that the president-elect himself, it's been confirmed he is not under any type of federal investigation, and that this investigation dealing with these tax allegations, these tax charges with Hunter, have been going on since 2018. That was out of the report that we had a couple of days ago. So it remains to be seen what's going to happen with this story. That was the newest piece of the story here today, was that Attorney General Bill Barr did know about this investigation in the spring. So.
Yeah, and that's not the only investigation that's making headlines right now. GOP Representative Jim Sensenbrenner on today filed a complaint to the House Ethics Committee urging the panel to immediately open an investigation into allegations that Representative Eric Swalwell had been compromised by a suspected Chinese spy. This is a story that's been developing all this week. We're going to play out a story from one of our Fox affiliates as well, talking about this case and this investigation. But that is the latest development in this, that there has been a complaint filed. So we'll play it out right here on NewsNOW for Fox.
Democrat Eric Swalwell is facing a growing storm of criticism from his Republican colleagues in Congress over an FBI probe into an alleged Chinese spy. he had ties to several years ago.
This man should not be in the Intel Committee. He's jeopardizing national security.
Until he comes forward and has a thorough and complete explanation for what happened, then he should not sit on the House Intelligence Committee and have access to classified information.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi waved off the matter today, saying both Democrat and Republican leaders were briefed in the past simultaneously about this threat.
I don't have any concern about Mr. Swalwell. I do think that it's unfortunate that Mr. McCarthy is trying to make an issue of this when his leaders, we all found out at the same time.
We still don't know who briefed congressional leadership. At the time, James Comey was the director of the FBI, and a former senior staffer on the House Intel Committee tells Fox News a Comey briefing would have been, quote, standard operating procedure. Swalwell's Republican colleagues on House Intel are lasering in on the role the alleged spy, Christine Fang, played in his California political career.
This was a Chinese citizen who was hyper-aggressive in developing relationships with politicians. We know that she helped him get reelected. She helped him raise money.
Swalwell himself insists he did nothing wrong and claims the FBI actually thanked him for helping their investigation. He also said Wednesday the whole story is just political revenge.
At the same time this story was being leaked out is the time that I was working on impeachment on the House Intelligence and Judiciary Committees. They may think that they're going to silence me. They're not going to silence me.
He was one of President Trump's fiercest critics during impeachment proceedings.
He's a repeat offender. Crimes against our Constitution, and yes, crimes that one day may be prosecuted statutorily.
Swalwell insists he long ago cut off all ties with Fang, though until Fox News reported it yesterday, he did have family members who were friends with her on Facebook. They are no longer. In Washington, Jillian Turner, Fox News.
So again, that's the latest on Eric Swalwell. I'm reading in this article that he himself has refused to comment on this explosive story for days, aside from a brief comment. I'll read that out right now. His office pointed Fox News us to a statement from an unnamed FBI official. To the San Francisco Chronicle, the official said that Swalwell was completely cooperative and under no suspicion of wrongdoing. It was a defensive briefing. Information was obtained where we do a duty to warn, and that he may be targeted by a foreign government. So an interesting report nonetheless from Axios. We will continue to follow this, and moving forward now with even more investigations, but these talking about Texas lawsuits. Texas is on everyone's mind today with the Supreme Court coming up and actually denying a lawsuit that was put in place by Ken Paxton. Andrew was up on the desk when that breaking news came down. So what is the latest, Andrew?
So just to get people up to speed here on this breaking, probably the biggest story of the day. Remember, we've been waiting all week to see what the Supreme Court would do. Would they take up this lawsuit? Would they let the petition go forward? They categorically denied that request. Started, yes, Daytona, by the Attorney General in Texas, Ken Paxton. He was joined by 18 other attorneys general, all Republican, in filing this lawsuit. Remember, what they were alleging was that they disagreed with how 4 states, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Georgia, administered their election in the wake of the coronavirus pandemic. They thought those measures to administer the election was unconstitutional. And so they essentially, you had states against states, and they wanted the Supreme Court to kind of, settle the matter once and for all. They're not going to do that. They're not even going to hear the case. And so we should remind you as well that 126 House Republicans signed onto an amicus brief yesterday and today, essentially endorsing this suit. But key Republican allies of the president's in the House and in these Republican states were categorically denied this chance at the Supreme Court today. The ruling was 7-2. We want to point out that 7 of the members who dissented, 3 of them were Trump-appointed justices: Coney Barrett, Gorsuch, and Kavanaugh. You're seeing this tweet here that essentially this decision was 9-0. It actually was 7-2, but those 2 dissenting justices, Clarence Thomas and Justice Alito, essentially said they would hear the case, they would let the petition go forward, but they still would have denied relief to the parties itself. So you could essentially make the argument that this was unanimously 9-0, but technically it was 7-2. But we're getting reaction as well from a lot of, politicos and people. So here we have a statement from Senator Ben Sasse about this, and I'm just going to read some of it here if I can see it. He said, since election night, a lot of people have been confusing voters by spinning Kenyan birther type Chavez rigged the election from the grave conspiracy theories. But every American who cares about the rule of law should take comfort that the Supreme Court, including all 3 of President Trump's picks, closed the book on this nonsense. That's coming from Republican Senator Ben Sasse, Daytona.
Yeah, so Britt, we'll go to the next one right here. The Michigan AG also coming out, whose state was actually targeted in this lawsuit, says today's Supreme Court decision is an important reminder that we are a nation of laws, and though some may bend to the desire of a single individual, the courts will not, obviously kind of pointing towards President Trump.
That's right, and the Michigan Attorney General wasn't defended in this case, right? Michigan was one of those states embroiled in this legal matter. And what the suit itself was seeking to do was to invalidate the elections in those 4 states, essentially, stripping millions of voters from their votes that they cast on Election Day because these Republican attorneys general disagree with how those states administer their elections in those states. So that would have been quite unprecedented. We've had both conservative and liberal constitutional legal scholars say, there really wasn't much to this. They were very pessimistic that the court would even take it up, which now we're learning just a couple hours ago that they did not. Daytona.
All right, so moving away from that, Andrew, thanks for breaking it all down for us. We are going to step into some other news with this vaccine approval that we're all waiting for. I mean, we held that FDA panel for how many hours was that the other day?
Like
they all
7 hours,
sat there and it was a panel made up of experts from across the country to kind of decipher the pros and the cons of this vaccine, if it would be safe to authorize emergency use for it in the United States. It's already in the UK. And so what we're waiting on now is the final okay, and that is coming from Commissioner Stephen Hahn. And there's been a little bit of interesting news today about Stephen Hahn, some saying that White House representative, obviously Mark Meadows, is kind of putting some pressure, some extra pressure on Hahn, saying if you don't pass this through, then you'll be fired, essentially. Isn't that right, Andrew?
Yeah, so, just to update for those watching, remember, this could come tonight, Daytona, right? This emergency use authorization from the FDA could come tonight on this Friday night. It was originally, people thought it was going to come either Saturday or Sunday, but as you mentioned, reports have been suggesting throughout the day, I think the AP, Washington Post, CNN, what have you, that Mark Meadows, the White House Chief of Staff, was really pressuring the FDA Commissioner, Stephen Hahn, to get that emergency use authorization today, end of day Friday. Remember, we're talking about the Pfizer COVID vaccine, just the Pfizer vaccine. And so I believe Stephen Hahn has come out since then and denied that report. But what those earlier reports were suggesting was, the White House was saying to Stephen Hahn, if you don't do this by the end of day Friday, put your resignation letter on my desk. I'm paraphrasing the reporting of the attention of Mark Meadows, the Chief of Staff. But we're getting some reports now that Hahn is denying these reports. Fox News is reporting that he has issued some type of statement categorically denying that he was ever put under this pressure, that he would face resignation if this wasn't done today.
Yeah, so I'll read this off for just a moment here. It's saying this is an untrue representation of the phone call with the Chief of Staff. This is what Hahn said in a statement. He said the FDA was encouraged to continue working expeditiously on Pfizer and BioNTech's EUA request, emergency use authorization. FDA is committed to issuing this authorization quickly, as we noted in our statement this morning. So he was kind of saying, yep, this isn't true. I want to be protective of the conversations I'm having with the White House, but I'm not going to be fired or whatever the reporting is saying from Meadows.
Yeah, exactly. So that was a kind of an interesting kind of political angle to everything going on with the vaccine authorization and subsequent distribution and allocation. So.
Yeah, so let's turn over to Congress now. A couple big things coming through. The National Defense Authorization Act as well. This was big news that we were following, but I believe it became official today, Andrew?
That's right. So the Senate, we were just waiting for the Senate to pass the NDAA. Remember, the House passed it earlier this week. And you know what this legislation essentially does is it stands for the National Defense Authorization Act. And so it sets defense policy, sets the Defense Department's budget and funding going into the next fiscal year. And remember, the president has vowed to veto that, but there are majorities in both the House and the Senate to override that veto at this point. If the president so chooses to do that still, you know, he wanted to attach that repeal of Section 230 that kind of, you know, establishes the parameters of what social media companies can and cannot do. He's always wanted to repeal that. And so for some reason, he wanted this kind of wish list item attached, the NDAA, which really has nothing to do with it. So the Senate and the House has both passed it at this point. So we're kind of just waiting for the president's signature or the president's veto on that bill. Just wanted to also mention that the Senate did pass the House's bill from earlier this week as well, the one week short-term stopgap funding bill. This gives Congress a little more time to eke out a spending bill, a funding bill going into the new year. Remember, they have now until I believe December 18th to get that done. So it kind of just buys them a week. It also buys them a week of time for more COVID relief negotiations going forward. So we'll be following that all here on NewsNOW from Fox, all these negotiations on Capitol Hill. Daytona?
Yeah, and still no word yet on the COVID-19 stimulus. I just want to touch on it every single time that we talk because this is money that people are watching, people are counting on, businesses are counting on. Still not a lot of headway on that, right?
No, there's really not. And, you know, they're trying to possibly tie it into the year-end funding bill. But at this point, those are kind of two standalone separate tracks that they're trying to do, you know, in parallel. So we'll be seeing any progress or lack thereof on that going into the weekend and in the week. So it remains to be seen too, Daytona, will, you know, Congress stay up really, like right up to the Christmas holiday to try to work this out, or will they go home and then come back? And so if that's the case, they won't be doing anything until the new year. So.
Yeah, and honestly, you know, like you said, probably not until the new year, but this funding bill was really big so that the government wouldn't shut down, right?
Exactly. The deadline today was today for that to happen, so that they have, you know, the word we all use, they've averted a government shutdown because that deadline was today. But just like I said, just for the next week, right, that this same problem will come up on the 18th, 7 days from now, or excuse me, yes, 7 days from now, I believe. So they'll be in the same position then, so they have to do a longer term funding bill.
Yeah.
Daytona, we did want to just kind of preview this for those watching. Remember, election 2020, December 14th, that is the day where electors will be meeting in their state legislatures to certify they'll vote in each and every state. So we'll have live coverage of that on NewsNOW from Fox. Remember, the electors are picked for, you know, whoever wins that state, and depending on how many electoral votes each state has, they'll be meeting to vote and certify the election in those states for whoever won those states. So we'll be following that too. December the 14th was the date for that, so we'll be on that story come Monday.
And then also, obviously, authorization of Pfizer. Any moment that could be coming down for tonight. So Andrew will be here for a few more hours as well as we give you live coverage, live, raw, unfiltered, nonstop news here on NewsNOW from Fox. We haven't missed a beat today. It's been a busy Friday, hasn't it?
Busy Friday, Daytona. I'm ready for the weekend.
Makes the day go fast though, right?
That's true.
We love that. All right, I'm going to send some of you off to a 2-minute commercial break, but thank you so much for joining us for this political rundown. I'm Daytona.